Hi, welcome to Senior Living 101, where we get expert takes on the environments where seniors live, work, play, heal, and thrive. Um, just so you guys know, this event is sponsored by SAGE, the Society for the Advancement of Gerontological Environments. And fun fact, everyone here is a SAGE member. So if you want in on this genius stuff that's going on in this episode, um, go to sagefederation.org and look into becoming a member. And maybe you could even join us on an episode. I'm your host, Trey King, and I am joined today by the esteemed Lisa Warnock, who's going to talk to us about lighting design for seniors. Lisa, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure, yeah. I'm the principal and founder of Glow Interior Designs. We're a senior living focused interior design firm based in Portland, Oregon. I'm also the treasurer of Sage. And yeah, actually, the name of my company, Glow, just quick fun fact, when I was starting out in the industry over 25 years ago, I couldn't decide if I wanted to be a lighting designer or an interior designer because I love lighting and I'm really I just get really into the weeds with it. Ultimately, I decided to become an interior designer that just really gets into the weeds and in lighting as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so like you're definitely, it's almost like we thought about this. You're the perfect person to talk about lighting in design
Hey.
for aging. Um, so, yeah, let's kick it off. Like, I guess first things first, why do you think thoughtful lighting design is so important when designing for seniors?
Oh gosh. Well, there's so many reasons. But I thought maybe to keep myself organized, I would share a couple slides because I think that
Yeah.
a picture tells a thousand words. So I'm
A
just gonna,
picture does. Let's do it.
yeah. Are you seeing my screen here with the light bulb on it?
I sure am now. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So funny you should ask, why is lighting design so important for seniors? Well, let
Oh,
me.
wow.
All right, why can't I advance my slides? Okay. Yeah, so I think one of the primary reasons why is because as we age, our eyes age no matter what our healthiness level is. So it's not a matter of if, it's when you start to experience some age-related vision problems. And people with vision problems just have a much higher risk of fall. So for those of you that are listening in instead of visually, I do have some slides with some statistics. I'll quickly hit them, and then you will be able to have access to the visuals on this as well. But people with vision problems are more likely to fall because they have a reduced amount of contrast that they're experiencing as your eyes age. This is a really big one that
Yeah.
people don't know as much about, and it's called a slower adaptation. So, a typical 70-year-old, it might take them up to 2.5 minutes to go from an extremely dark space into an extremely well lit space or vice versa and actually be able to see anything. And I don't know if you've ever experienced that, Trey, you're very young, but when I'm already starting to notice it when I drive at night. And so if I'm like looking out at the dark black night and then I look at something in my inside my car that it's illuminated, it just takes a little bit of time for my eyes to adjust from far to near and from dark to light. And that is a natural thing that happens to our eyes as we age. It's very dangerous for somebody to be plunged into essentially pitch black darkness and not seeing. So we have to design for that. Depth
Yeah.
perception gets reduced as the eye ages. I think we probably hear a lot about this increased sensitivity to glare. It's a really big thing for seniors,
Yeah.
and then just generally the visual acuity lessens. Like this is why we're wearing reading glasses after 40. The eyes just start to go downhill, unfortunately. Here's a great visual. It's kind of gross, but kind of cool. The lens of like a typical healthy 10-year-old is shown on top here. That's what our eyes are born like. But as we age, this is a healthy 65-year-old lens that we're looking at.
Oh
And
man.
it's thickened, it's yellowed. It's basically like this big yellow callus that's on top of your lens. I like to be extra gross about it and compare it to like fingernails and toenails. As people age, their toenails just get thicker and yellower. Same thing happening to your eye lens.
Oh man. So for our
Yeah,
listening audience, do you mind? I'll try to do like kind of a description of the two as like
yeah.
somebody
Oh,
who's just
thank
seeing
you.
this for the first time. So
Good
for our
idea.
listening audience, the lens of a healthy 10-year-old, it looks about like a cross section of somebody's like thick eyeglasses. You
Hmm.
can see it's kind of like convex on both sides, like you see in
Yep.
the biology textbooks. And yeah, the lens of a healthy 65-year-old, it's about it's about 50% thicker. It's also a lot more opaque, and there's sort of like a
Hmm.
striation, like a layering in there that you would imagine if you were trying to look through that lens, like as
Yeah.
if they were eyeglasses, it would just be a lot harder to see.
Yeah, great physical descriptions there.
Oh yeah,
And
that's what I'm
and
here
what
for.
yeah, and while we're looking at it, I mean, just this is why we need more light. This is why seniors are always
Yeah.
saying, I need more light to see in this restaurant. I can't read my menu. I can't see in this room. And a young person's like, what are you talking about? It's totally light enough. It's because think of how much more lumen power it takes to get through that thick yellow calloused layer. It just takes more.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So with this change in the lens, we need more light, as we just talked about. We're seeing people have a reduced image to object contrast. So we're both seeing contrast reduce while also experiencing a higher um, reaction to glare. So our eyes are less likely to be able to take glare on while also needing more contrast, which is a conundrum in design.
Yeah.
It's a fine line when you're designing for older people because in some places contrast makes a big difference between health and safety and feeling like you can be really independent. But then we also have to think about people experiencing dementia, and sometimes contrast is a problematic a design element in
Yeah.
flooring, for example, for dementia.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
I'll
yeah,
draw a line between some of our from our previous episodes and say like we had sort of a conversation about the difference between good and bad contrast, and that's a
yeah,
huge like lighting. We didn't really focus on it on that episode, but lighting is kind of the best tool you have in your toolbox outside of like specifying different colors for highlighting stuff like that, for highlighting
yeah,
grab bars when they need to be contrasted, or
yep.
you know yeah, and vice versa.
Yeah. And then, just to quickly sidebar over into this conversation as it relates to designing, say, a bathroom in a memory care. One of the things a lot of us do is we put a darker contrast wall behind that toilet so that the
Mm,
white toilet is able to be visually seen more easily by somebody with reduced vision. Um, but when you add that dark wall color into the bathroom, then you're also absorbing some of the light that you've added into the bathroom. And, the bathroom is the biggest place where people experience falls and injury. So it's again a fine line. You want to provide that visual contrast, but then you need to correct for it with even more illumination to make sure that you're providing safe and adequate lighting levels in the bathrooms as well.
yeah, that's awesome, Lisa.
Yeah, and so then another thing that it happens to all of us is that our vision, our lenses, as I said, the yellow, and what that does is it actually creates a yellow cast to what we're looking at.
Mm,
It makes it more difficult to see subtle colors with short wavelengths. So blues and yellows have shorter wavelengths, and as we age, those colors are more difficult for us to see. So bumping up the intensity of those colors when you use them helps them to not look like a neutral. And sometimes when we do like town halls to some of our residents at our lifetime communities, and we show a palette we think is beautiful, and then we get, everything just looks gray to me, and everything just, it's very blah, and it's like, okay, I need to up the intensity of the colors that I'm using here because it's not being perceived as colorfully by this person as I'm seeing it. So thinking of,
yeah, that's such an interesting point because we spend so much time, especially in the design for aging community,
yeah.
talking about the accommodations in terms of physical health and well-being,
Hmm.
and a huge component of well-being is living in a beautiful space,
Yeah,
right? And if we're
absolutely.
not designing something that somebody else doesn't know to be beautiful, it's building a great case for you know, getting the whole package of somebody who knows about the health and safety parameters, right? And
Mhm.
somebody who can kind of aesthetically speak the language of somebody with these sort of sensory kind of yeah, restrictions.
Yeah, I should have brought them with me for our conversation today, but we have a little set of those little, disposable glasses that you can buy online that you can put them on, and you can look at your carpets and your paints and all of the materials that you've put together, and you can try on different age-related eye diseases to see, well, how does this age-related eye disease affect my carpet pattern and how I'm seeing it. And then I put on my yellowing lenses. Okay, so maybe I do need to bump that color up because it's not really showing as vivid as I thought. So those are a great design tool. Every interior designer that works in the space and in healthcare should have them in their library so that you can
Yeah,
try those on and check how you're doing. I don't know where ours are in here in our office right now, but we have them. I just don't know where they are. Um, Declining in visual acuity, we talked about, well-known fact as we at 40 and above, the readers come on, you need more contrast, you have a hard time reading, um, higher light levels help, and then just problems with daily living and mobility can occur if you're not designing for these instances. So falls, injuries happen, and a loss of independence. It's a huge bummer.
huge
And then,
bummer.
yeah, so then here's another huge bummer. It's just like, look at this like tragic world that somebody with like experiencing heavily yellowed and thickened lenses. Like if you were to design like a super vanilla very neutral, very low contrast space, it would be a bummer to walk through. It wouldn't be the safest for somebody with low vision. Like you can barely see that handrail on the wall there, right? You can barely
Yeah,
see where the flooring turns a corner. You could easily bump into that corner there because it's hard to see. So I like to
yeah,
really remember this image when I'm designing for contrast and I'm thinking about, um, what color should my handrails be? Yeah, I'd love them to go away visually because I don't want to have to look at ugly handrails. No, you want them to be there high contrast, and not be the same tone as the wall.
yeah. It's a careful line, right? That we're walking between designing a beautiful space and also designing a space that serves the people we're designing for. And if you're talking to somebody who's not a specialist and can't talk you through all of this stuff, then like
Yeah.
it's dangerous because it's really easy to say like, oh man, I want that to blend in and like I want it to be this beautiful white box. And yeah, I
Hmm.
guess one, your elderly population isn't going to view it as
Yeah.
a white box. They're going to view it.
No.
And I guess again for our listening audience here, I'll describe the image that Lisa has up.
Yeah.
It's very clearly like kind of a white heavy interior finish environment with a lot of like clean lines and planes, and it's completely yellowed. And it's hard to assess what it would look like without the filter on it, but I
Hmm.
would not want to live here.
Yeah. Yeah. So we don't want like Le Corbusier designing a senior living environment anytime soon, right? We
Yeah,
need to.
yeah. No, no, man,
Yeah.
just
So,
great point about like balancing, some of what we would want, like a maybe a marketing team for somebody like a marketing team that isn't intimately familiar with a senior living environment,
yeah.
balancing what they want from an aesthetic perspective with what the people who are actually calling this place home want from an aesthetic perspective. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So all of those reasons are the reason why I think it's so important to be very careful about designing the lighting systems in senior living environments. Much more important than, most of our typical market sectors a person might work in. It couldn't be more important, I think, than in senior living.
Yeah. I've got another question for you, Lisa, if you're
Yeah,
ready for it.
sure.
Yeah. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about why it's important. What you putting your interior designer hat on and lighting designer hat on, what are the best practices? What are like, some of the best things that an interior designer who was totally unfamiliar with designing for aging, what are some of your best practices that you'd recommend them to implement first? Like if I'm no knowledge of how to kind of operate with this. I don't have those special, yellow filter glasses in my
Hmm.
office. Clearly that connotes a level of like familiarity with the environment.
Yeah.
If I don't have those, like, what would I design, and what
Yeah.
would you recommend I do?
Yeah, so there's a number of initial approaches I would say to take. I think every architecture firm and interior design firm in our space should have a copy of the IES RP 28 most current lighting guidelines, excuse me. So
Yeah.
that's the Illuminating Engineering Society of North America, and they have been publishing manuals of best practices in design for lighting in every single possible condition, roadways, hospitals, grocery stores, but they have a very specific book just on designing for aging eye and low vision. And
Oh
in that
wow.
book, it's a great publication. I actually helped edit the last version of it to bring a little bit of the designer perspective because there's a lot of, researchers and people that have a lot of very big passionate opinions about it, but are not necessarily in the day to day of trying to implement how do you get 100-foot candles of continuous light in the entry vestibule of a memory care because they're trying to design for that slow adaptation thing I talked to you about. So,
Yeah.
when you walk in from a dark outside into at night and and then you walk into like 100-foot candles of illuminated foyer. I mean, that's also blinding. And so we've had to have a lot of those kind of arguments and fights. And so now there's a clause in there that adapts it to a different level of lighting at night than it does in the daytime. Anyway,
Yeah.
sidebar there. That is a fantastic document. Everybody should have one because there's literally tables in there, tables that say if you're in a memory care environment and you're in a dining room, you should have 50-foot candles on every single table surface. When you're in a bathroom, you should have 50-foot candles of light in your basin so you can see if you're trying to put, contact lenses or shave or, do something with where you need a lot of light. So there's a prescriptive path in there. And then a lot of states, and like I'm in Oregon, and in Oregon, we've adopted IES RP28 as our requirement in memory care environments.
Wow.
Um,
Awesome.
yeah, so some states require it, not a lot yet. And then some states refer back to it, and the FGI says, hey, you should use the IES guidelines. So that's a real easy like go-to. It also goes into best practice design. In quite some length. But some of the basic premises of designing for older eyes, best practices are one, start with using a shielded light source, like, the swagging exposed light bulb where you're looking at the filament. It's been all the rage for quite some time. Everybody loves that look, but it's not great for seniors. You really want to be encapsulating the light source in a light colored diffuser of some sort. So a shade that, because again, if you do a black light shade on there, then you're spending all this money and electricity trying to pump light out that the senior needs, and then you're taking it all away with the dark shade. Or even worse, you're focusing it all on the ground, then you have these really dark upper walls. So white or as near to white as you possibly can, shades that completely cover the light source are a really great way to provide more light, more regular light with outshadowing and less glare. So that's
Right.
kind of rule number one. Most the most important rule I think in lighting is well shielded light sources. Um, Leaning into cove light and layering light is also really important. So when you're designing for a high level of illumination, you don't want to get 100-foot candles out of a single source of light because it's going to be bright and it's going to be painful. It's going to glare. So layers, 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 layers all day long. Layers also really help with making a more residential feeling environment. And so I love cove lighting. I use it as much as I possibly can. Nowadays, you can get the teeny tiniest little strip in a cove. It's so small and it's banging out all of this illumination, but it's indirect. It's bouncing up and down off of the painted ceiling that's also in a light tone, and so it doesn't create glare because it's a reflected light source. It's not direct, it's indirect, and so it doesn't hurt your eyes. Great
I
way
have a
to,
question for you, Lisa,
yeah,
kind of relevant to this. Most of the projects I've worked on, to your point, like layered lighting is like number one. And,
yeah,
it involves a ton of cove lighting for us too. And one of the things that becomes sort of an architecture coordination issue, and it's become
yeah,
one of my sort of like playbook, like first steps is basically make sure there's 10 inches to a foot of extra
yeah.
space in
Get your
those
hand
like,
in. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Because you probably know more about this than me, but like hotspots become an issue.
yeah.
Just detailing the cove becomes an issue. And if
Mm-hmm.
you want those coves to really sing, you need about a foot of space between the like the bottom of the cove and the top. And I think there are some like low profile options in the market, but
There are now. Yeah, 10 years ago even, like you couldn't do a cove unless it was a foot.
Yeah.
Now you can do them in even a 4 inch drop if you need to
Ooh,
in a pinch.
nice.
And because of the way that they're designing the fixtures now, and sometimes we're just so limited on our ceiling heights, and we want so much to add some interest up there and to add some coves. But we're already just at like 8.6. But even if you're at 8.6 at your highest, you could still get a little indirect light by dropping it down 4 inches with the right light fixture. So they've got them now that are kind of triangulated in shape so they can fit back in there.
Mm.
And then the light goes out. Um, and they're so small, and the light source is so continuous that you don't get socket shadow anymore. Like back in the
Oh my
day, we
gosh.
had we had fluorescent tubes we were working around, and then yeah, you had 3 or 4 inches of darkness between the connections of all of those, and that was a terrible look. And so now we just get these LED tapes basically with huge output. High output tapes are fantastic for not having to have that 12 inches when you can't do it.
So I'll put the spotlight on you, pun intended. Is so that 4 inch cove, like if I
Hmm.
if I were an architect, because this is one of the things that like immediately went into my back pocket when I was,
Yeah,
when I'm coordinating floor to floor heights, like
yeah,
if I would love to save as much space as I can for
yeah,
opportunities like that to design
yeah,
well for seniors and build in nice cove lights.
yeah.
Does that 4 inches, do you have problems with hotspots at that height? Or like what's your, as a lighting designer and interior
Mhm.
designer, what's your sort of preferred depth there?
Um, well, it just really depends on the light source that you're
Yeah,
using. I mean, it is more
fair.
expensive sometimes to use those really high, like those really highly technically designed, high output LED tapes.
Yeah.
So if the project's on a bit more of a limited budget, you could use a more conventional fixture type if you had a little bit more drop on your ceiling. Um, it just sort of depends on, in a perfect world, you would have 10.5 foot ceilings, and you would be able to take that full 12-inch drop, and that would go to 10, and that would feel wonderful. And
Yeah.
then you'd have a nice deep coffer, and it would just really add a lot of texture and layer on the ceiling. But sometimes we're working with really severe height restrictions, and we're just going to take what we can get, and we'll take that 4 inches if that's all we can get.
Fair. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Well,
So,
that's
yeah, layered lighting. There's some more tips and tricks. Being really careful about designing for putting the light where it's needed. Don't, when you're designing a library, you want to be illuminating the books, not just illuminating the general space. So again, layering is important. And then making sure it might not be the most beautiful way to do it, but this one had the parabolics where a resident could stand in front of the book, and then the book face is still getting washed with light. You just have to be very careful to make sure you're not putting the light fixture behind somebody's head, and then their body is actually taking all of the light on the back of their head and it's not hitting the surface they're intending to light. So you just have to be
oh yeah.
careful. And then my favorite way, this is a little bit of an old picture, but to light a unit or apartment door is just a continuous cove across it as well, because it washes down the entire door. It helps provide a lot of light on the face. If you've got a peephole and somebody is knocking on your door and you're looking out at them, if their face is in the dark, that's not helping you to have that peephole, and you might not feel very safe opening that door. Opening the key, using a key at the keyhole, especially if it's a dark, like if you got this beautiful black hardware or dark bronze hardware, and you don't have any light there, it's really hard to get the key in the keyhole. So washing that whole surface with light. It also really is nice for breaking up a corridor that's really long and just having like the constant like splashes of contrasted light. And it makes it very clear these are where the apartment homes are. And then having
Yeah.
a different layer of light that's even more intense, focused on the artwork, that just really helps with wayfinding and making it a nice residential environment.
Yeah, yeah, and for our listening audience, I was gonna say the same thing if you didn't, because you had mentioned the residential environment and like how
Mm-hmm.
how the increased lighting levels kind of tie to that.
Yeah.
For our listening audience who doesn't get to see these and just intuit it, these are some really beautiful, like they feel residential, and I know you mentioned like the dating aside, they just feel like somebody's home, and that's the whole point of what we're doing
Hmm.
here, and I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. So that's all I have for today, in terms of slides. So
yeah.
I'll
Well,
send that off.
I do have one more sort of like off the cuff question for you,
Yeah.
Lisa.
Sure.
I want to kind of go back to what we were talking about with respect to slow adaptation. I've
Yeah.
explained that to somebody before, and I use the analogy of transition lenses, where like imagine if you had
Yeah.
transition lenses on, like,
Yes, my son
and
has those. Yeah.
oh really, yeah, and,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like that, but with a little bit of glare sensitivity as well, where when you like walk from a
Totally.
yeah, when you walk from a really bright room into a dark one, like you're just totally blind for a little bit. It's like you're wearing
Yeah.
sunglasses indoors until your transition lenses. Is that correct though?
That's a
I'm
perfect
yeah,
analogy.
that's
Yeah, because
awesome.
yeah, when you walk outside and your transitions aren't catching up fast enough, and they're not darkening quickly enough, it's uncomfortable feeling. And also, yeah, you don't have good visual acuity because you're squinting. So yeah, very similar. Um, it's just a little more alarming the older people get and the more their eyes, it's kind of like a muscle in your eye that has to kind of flex and contract.
Yeah,
And it just as that muscle ages, it just can't do it very well and it can't do it very quickly. And so it just takes, I mean, think about 2.5 minutes of walking from one space into another and just having to maybe stand there and hold onto the wall, hold
yeah,
onto the
yeah,
handbar, because you can't see anything. I mean, it's you plunged into absolute darkness.
yeah.
We
Inside
just,
with sunglasses on, I couldn't see a
yeah,
thing either, and I've been
no,
there. Yeah,
yep, yep,
yeah.
totally.
Well, super great. Any other sort of like thoughts or closing kind of comments to wrap us up here, Lisa?
I guess I'll just throw one in there, and that is, this is to the developers and the operators out there that are, you know, designing projects. It is really important to have somebody on the team that does understand the importance of lighting design. I think, hiring a lighting designer is a fantastic return on investment. And I think everybody kind of looks to the architect, and the architect looks to the interior designer, and people, and then the architect looks to the electrical engineer. And most electrical engineers are not lighting designers. They are engineers, and they are there to ensure that the project circuiting is drawn correctly and that the required light levels are being met for the authority having jurisdiction, but they're not actually lighting designers.
Yep,
Very rarely does a mechanical engineer have a lighting designer on the team. So it's just one of those things that falls through the gaps. And so, if I'm
yep.
on the project, I'll raise my hand and I'll, be the person that will ensure that the lighting is being designed to best practices. But if there isn't a person on the team for that, then hire a lighting designer, a dedicated lighting designer to be a core team member. They get left off the consultant list all the time.
Totally. Yep. And I'm right
Yeah,
there with you. I
yeah,
will say, I will totally say that's a responsibility of a good architect to,
yeah,
put,
totally.
there's such a big difference between code minimum and best practice that like
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to meet code minimum. And if you want something that's really good for the end user,
Yeah,
especially in senior living design, like that's why we're having this
yeah,
conversation and I love it.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
think
So,
owners often think, oh, the architect would know how to do that. And it's like, well, architect has to know how to do so many things. And it's not necessarily in the architect's training that they've had this. It's not a standard of practice. Um,
yep.
so yeah, so
And
I'd
and
say,
I'll say like a good architect should know to ask those people. And I
hmm
think that one advantage is like, hey, if you hire somebody who knows about these kinds of rules and regulations, like I said, like we're always baking an extra foot into our floor to floor to make room
yeah,
for cove lighting. And
that's great.
it just makes it so much better, right?
Yes,
So
I would love
yeah,
to work on a project with you for
oh
for
man, we
that
totally
reason.
should, Lisa.
I
That'll be
know,
great.
right? Yeah.
All right.
And Trey,
Well,
this has been really fun talking to you. And I didn't even touch on the subject of like tunable lighting and circadian lighting, because I didn't want to open up a can of worms we didn't have time for today. Because I know, these are like short conversations, but I'd love to have another conversation just around tunable and circadian lighting. I've been
yeah.
doing it in my memory care projects since 2012. So what's that, 14 years now? It's the technology has been around and in practice for that long, and it has really improved since I started way back then doing that. And so we could have a whole entire conversation just about that someday.
That's amazing. That would be awesome. Well, hey, Lisa,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on and talking with us today. It's been a
Thank you.
blast.
Yeah.
And for our listening audience, I hope you enjoyed it as well, and I hope you learned a bunch. And if you're interested to learn more, you can go to the SAGE website, sagefederation.org, for some more information. And feel free to reach out to me. That's tking@hksinc.com. If you have any questions or suggestions, like Lisa's awesome one for a dedicated circadian lighting session, I think we should definitely do that.
Yeah.
Um, or just if you have any general questions or comments, again, feel free to email me or send questions to info@sagefederation.org. And stay tuned. Again, one last, I'll plug the membership opportunity again. If you want some more access to even more great content like this, we have a bunch of member exclusive content on our website. That's sagefederation.org. That's one last time, sagefederation.org.
Awesome.
Well, again, Lisa, thanks for coming. It's been a blast talking to you, and
You too, Trey.
I look forward to doing it again.
Yeah, let's do it. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, bye everyone.
Bye.